the RX 5500 XT 8GB, which I think is a seriously underrated GPU. I put out this poll and you lot decided that I should be testing an RX 5500 XT 8GB for my next GPU benchmarking video. And your wish is my command because I have bought one and I've tested it as well. This entry-level Navi card features 1408 cores, 8GB of GDDR6 memory running through a 128-bit memory bus. All of this is in a package rated for 130 watts. In my testing, it didn't go above 110 watts, which means it's actually pretty power efficient, and I suspect you'll be fine with something like a 450 watt power supply. The seller I got it from is called Kex, or that's not the actual pronunciation of it, I don't want to get demonetized. But if you're from the UK, you probably know who they are. They sell like phones and games and just other computing accessories like this. And if you buy a graphics card from them, they never really tell you which model you're going to get. So if I ordered a 5500 XT, it could be a power color one, it could be a sapphire one, who knows. I got this MSI Mech card and it was boxed as well, which is always a nice bonus. It's a fairly low-end 5500 XT, like the colour isn't particularly amazing on it, but it does have 2 copper heat pipes, and it did keep the GPU core under 60 degrees C while gaming, which isn't too bad, even though the fans were pretty whiny and the fan curve was kind of terrible. It kept ramping up and down. It was very annoying, to be fair. It's also got a backplate as well, but unfortunately it is a plastic backplate, so it doesn't really serve any functional cooling purpose at all. It's probably more of an insulator if anything, but it does make the card look a bit better, and it can protect the card from like damage from the back of the PCB and stuff like that, so it's better to have it than to not have it, I suppose. Also, like most 5500 XTs, the MSI Mech's got a single 8-pin PCIe power connector, so make sure your power supply's got one of those if you're looking to pick one of these up. But with all that out of the way, how does the 5500 XT 8GB get on in gaming? To see if the thing's actually any good, I've tested it at 1080p with no upscaling on my test bench system, which has an Intel Core i5-12400F, 32GB of dual rank, dual channel, 3200 MHz CL16 DDR4 memory, an MSI B660-A Pro motherboard, and a Sabrent 1TB NVMe Gen 3 SSD. The GPU's been left totally out stock with no overclocks applied, and I've also enabled resizable bar, which is available on this graphics card, and it should help out with gaming performance, so it's available to me, I may as well use it. And lastly, all data was gathered using the Adrenaline Driver version 23.9.3. So let's see how this thing gets on in 2023. Jumping straight into the benchmarks with Cyberpunk 2077 up first, and this is where the pleasant surprises begin, because setting it to the low preset with high textures, as 8GB of VRAM's enough for that, the 5500 XT got 85 FPS on average with a 1% low of 66 FPS. This is absolutely incredible performance, all things considered, because I was expecting around RX 580 levels of performance, and judging from these numbers alone, it's absolutely smashed the RX 580 in this title. So yes, Cyberpunk 2077 is very playable, and you could probably get away with a medium preset and the game would look quite a bit better as well. So yeah, this is incredible performance, all things considered. Next game up is F1 2023, and here I set it to the high preset, and the performance here was pretty acceptable. With 80 FPS on average with a 1% low of 68 FPS, this is pretty decent performance in my opinion. Maybe setting it to a lower preset like medium or maybe even low might be a good thing for you, as racing games, you're going to be wanting as much frame rate as possible, so that might be an option there for you. However, if you want prettier visuals, the high preset looks pretty good in F1 23, and the performance isn't too bad here either. This GPU is getting no rest today, because up next is Starfield, and here I set it to the low preset, but I've manually disabled FSR. Even so, on average, the 5500 XT got 57 FPS with a 1% low of 53. This is very playable in my opinion. It's more FPS than what you'd be getting on the Series S or the Series X. And from what I can remember, the 5500 XT is below the minimum graphics card for this game. So yeah, this is a win in the 5500 XT's book, in my opinion. Shifting over to the polar opposite of Starfield, and that is Rainbow Six Siege. This game, the performance is going to be great, and it was on the medium preset. That is because the 5500 XT got 244 FPS on average with a 1% low of 184. So if you've got a 1080p 240Hz panel, the medium preset on Rainbow Six Siege will do you just fine, and you'll be getting a nice competitive gaming experience here with no issues. There's virtually no stutters at all, so these are the settings that I'd recommend. Next up is Forza Horizon 5, and this was another great performer for the 5500 XT. The game did recommend the balanced preset, but the high preset performed just fine, getting 97 FPS on average with 82 FPS for the 1% low. Yet again, this is great performance, and to be fair, it probably looks similar to the Series S on performance mode, yet it's getting more frame rate, and you could probably get away with maybe the Ultra preset if you were happy with 60 FPS at 1080p. Even so, this is the beauty about PC gaming, you can adjust the settings for your liking. Fortnite is up next, and this does tend to be a bit of an Nvidia stomping ground, but even so, with my default DirectX 12, with low settings but keeping the view distance on high along with the textures, performance was fine. 180 FPS on average with 131 for the 1% low is great performance in my book. Usually Fortnite likes to stutter quite a bit with the 1% lows, but that wasn't an issue today with the 5500 XT, which is a win in my book because the last thing you want is stutters when you're in a gunfight in Fortnite. So Fortnite is definitely playable, especially if you've got a 144Hz 1080p gaming monitor. Next up is Horizon Zero Dawn, and this is another game that pleasantly surprised me because unlike with the RX 580 video, I set that to the original preset. Here we got away with the favour quality preset. This netted 72 FPS on average with a 1% low of 58 FPS, which is great performance coming from the 5500 XT. These are probably the settings that I'd recommend at 1080p. It looks better than the PS4 version of the game, and yet it's getting double the frame rate, so yeah, you've got basically nothing to complain about here because the game looks great even on 1080p, and we ran into no weird VRAM issues either, so performance pretty good in my opinion. Last game up today is Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and from my experience, AMD cards have actually performed quite well in this title. Here I set it to the minimum preset with high textures, as 8GB of VRAM is perfectly fine for that, and this netted 111 FPS on average with a 1% low of 90 FPS. This is totally playable, and on the minimum preset, the frame rate doesn't drop as much when there's a lot of smoke effects on screen, which is always a benefit because multiplayer is absolutely chaos on this game, so these are the settings I would definitely recommend with the 5500 XT in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. So all in all, I'm actually pretty impressed with the performance of the 5500 XT. Like, I legit had a smile on my face while I was benchmarking it because it just exceeded my expectations so well. I went into this expecting it was going to be performing similar to an RX 580, but it turns out, just by looking at the numbers alone, it's absolutely demolished that GPU. This is a comparison video I am looking to make, so make sure you stay subscribed for that because this will be releasing in the coming weeks. Back to the 5500 XT though, and across the board, I think it put up a very good fight with great performance figures in all of the games tested today. For once, Cyberpunk wasn't the worst performing game, and it even got above 60 FPS on average, around 80ish FPS to be exact. The honour or dishonour of the worst performing game goes to Starfield, but even then it got below just 60 FPS, which is not too bad without the aid of FSR. Also, the 5500 XT is below the minimum GPU spec for this game, so this is a win in my book. On the other side of things, on lightweight and esports titles, games like Rainbow Six Siege and Fortnite ran totally fine with no issues at all, so if you wanted to play other games like Valorant, Counter-Strike 2, they're perfectly viable on an RX 5500 XT, and it's a GPU I would definitely recommend for them. With all that being said, we arrive at the recommendation. And in a void, the RX 5500 XT 8GB is a great GPU, especially for the price point. But naturally, being at this price point of around £80 to £100, there are going to be a few competitors, and the main one I can think of is Nvidia's GTX 1660 Super. This should perform a bit better on average while costing around the same amount of money. However, it does have 6GB of GDDR6 memory, which is 2 less than the 5500 XT. Because of this, in newer games, you might be running into a few issues, which is granted, even some 8GB cards are running into issues now, but I'd rather have 8GB than 6GB in these games. A graphics card that goes for around the same price that doesn't have these problems is the GTX 1070. This should perform around the same as the 1660 Super, but it might be trailing behind a bit now due to driver and game optimization. So that is something to look out for, but I'd rather have it because of its 8GB of VRAM. And it's just a legendary GPU, let's be honest. If you're willing to spend a bit more money, maybe an extra 50 or 60 pounds more, a graphics card like the RX 5700 XT might be a great option for you. It has a lot more power than the 5500 XT, it's got a bigger memory bus, and it will just net you more performance in games. If you're looking for more of a Team Green graphics card, the RTX 2060 Super and RTX 2070, they're basically the same GPU, they perform the same at least. Also go for around the same price. So if you need CUDA acceleration, or maybe you want to do some entry-level ray tracing, or you want DLSS, the NVIDIA GPUs are a good option at this price point as well. But by costing £50 more, they are also 50% more, so that is something you need to factor in with these more powerful graphics cards as well. But back to the RX 5500 XT, and it's a GPU that has genuinely impressed me quite well because it's absolutely smashed my expectations, as I was expecting this thing to perform along an RX 580 or something along those lines. Will it perform amazingly in the latest AAA titles? No, not really. You will have to lower the settings down to low, but it's got the VRAM to at least play them just fine. And you've also got AMD's FSR as well, which can help out, even though I don't necessarily recommend it at 1080p. On the other hand are esports and lightweight titles, which will just run totally fine on this graphics card. And don't forget, this thing is still fully supported by AMD, and it also supports DirectX 12.1 at a feature level as well, so this will help out with the future proofness of this graphics card, even though it's not really that future proof. But yeah, I'm kind of waffling here. So overall, it's really good to see that the 5500 XT has been aging pretty well thanks to driver and game optimizations. And it actually does have a lot of feature support inside it as well, like it's built on the RDNA architecture, which is actually quite a strong architecture as well. And it also has support for the latest DirectX 12 versions like DX 12.1 as well, so every game will at least start on this thing. So as far as I'm concerned, the 8GB RX 5500 XT is a pretty underrated and it's a pretty good GPU in my book. So if you want to see some more GPU content, there's 2 videos right here which might be right up your alley, and if you got this far into the video, I want to thank you and maybe even consider asking you for a like if you like the video. With that being said, I'm going to leave this one here.